Hey, so it's Kirsty Gwynn here. I am the founder of Positive EQ, and today I'm actually here live to introduce you to Molly Courtney of Love Health Coaching. So I'm going to add Molly and welcome her in a moment, but just a bit about her. Molly Courtney works with adventurous women who want to improve their health by helping them to find creative solutions that meet their individual needs, so that they can have freedom with their health choices and get results that last, so sustainability. And we're going to be talking about some really cool things. We're going to be talking about how positive psychology plays a role in reaching your health goals, about thoughts and fears around food, and then also why it's important to enjoy food from a health perspective. Sounds interesting, right? So, kind of, what role does pleasure play in our health? Thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited to find out the answers to these questions and to hear a bit more about you and what you do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is like one of my favorite topics. I was really excited, like preparing and kind of thinking through it. I was like, I really love talking about this topic. So I'm excited to discuss it with you as well. I basically help people who are, they're kind of tired of the diet system. They want to improve their health, but they can't put themselves through another program and feel miserable through it. And they're really looking for individual solutions, so things that meet their needs and meet them where they're at right now. And it's a one-on-one conversation, and I just walk them through the process of, where are you now, where you want to be, and what are all the steps in between here and there that are, in line with you
Yeah.
and what your values are. Everything comes into the picture when we're talking about it. It's not just about food. It's not just about exercise. It's about how does this affect your entire social circle, your entire life force, what you're putting out as far as um, your energy. How does it affect how you interact with other people? How does it affect your social life, your work life, your everything comes into play in our discussion. So it's really cool. I kind of think of it like a puzzle. And at the beginning, we have a lot of puzzle pieces out on the table. And as we start talking, we start to see which puzzle pieces we want to work on first and how they're, how they work together. And
Yeah.
it's really cool to walk people through that process.
Fantastic. Sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
So, so you and I both share a passion for positive psychology. And
Mhm.
I'm interested how positive psychology can help people reach a health goal. What role does it?
Yeah, it does a really great job when we like traditionally. I think the way that we are approaching health as a whole is takeaway. So takeaway, you can't eat these foods, you can't do this, exercise is for punishment. And so there's a lot of negativity kind of around the process of improving your health. And so positive psychology is kind of, it's not that those things are going to disappear necessarily, but we're going to replace them with positive things. So rather than taking something away, it's going to feel a lot better and you'll be able to maintain it a lot longer if we're adding in. So rather
Yeah.
than saying you can't eat X, Y, and Z, okay, what foods do we want to add in? And in the process of adding in, those other things naturally get pushed out because there's only room for so many things in our life. So if we're replacing with positive habits, then the negative ones just kind of disappear on their own and we don't have to fight them. They just go away because we're having so many good feelings over here with adding in that we
Yeah.
kind of forget there, and then we think back and go, oh yeah, I used to do that. And I don't know why or how it disappeared, but I just kind of stopped doing that. And so it's kind of this magical process. People are always like, I don't understand like how that worked, but it does.
Yeah.
Because they're enjoying the process instead of like it being a constant battle within themselves or a constant battle against their habit that's so ingrained in their brain. So we're just building that new positive aspect to it. So
Yeah.
that's the approach I definitely take. Yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds really, really wonderful and really empowering. And I think so often we focus our energy on that kind of getting rid of something, and there's this void, and we feel the void. I
Yeah.
know I went through a bit of a kind of health phase last year where I was eating really healthy and things, and it was very much driven by I was just so excited to try all these new foods, and that was just kind of a thing I did out of interest. But it was so easy, in fact, because, like you say, I was so focused on what I was eating that I could eat that was new to me, and I could experiment with how I felt after eating those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Can you see the comments? I know sometimes the interview
Yes.
we have a comment. It says, in moderation, isn't moderation the key, whether you're eating good or bad? Um, yeah, so that brings up a really good point of good or bad. And really,
Yeah.
there, in my opinion, there aren't good or bad foods, and sometimes falling into that labeling of good and bad. And we could talk about how our thoughts affect food in a little
Yeah.
bit, but sometimes that labeling can, in fact, kind of make it bad for us. So
Okay.
everything is the poisons within the dose. Absolutely. So moderation is key, but also our thinking about foods good or bad, or are we good or bad because we're eating it, that also plays a key role and a factor into it. So moderation is key, but it's not something you have to really focus or put a ton of energy into when you are at peace with food and when
Mhm.
you have a good positive relationship with food and your body. Then
Yeah.
it's not a battle. It's not like, oh, I can't have that because I already ate 10 of those, or I can't, whatever. It's just kind of a natural thing that happens.
Yeah.
I don't know, did that
Fantastic.
answer the question? Follow-up questions are welcome if I didn't answer it completely.
Great.
And
Yes,
thank you for
please,
the
please let
question.
us know if there's anything
Yeah.
else you'd like to know, and anyone else too. So
Mhm.
you touched on this a little bit. You said we talk about thoughts and fears around food. So tell us about how that actually affects our health.
Yeah. So digestion starts with thoughts. So if I were to like describe to you this amazing meal and it was like your favorite meal and you have all these positive memories associated to it, you would notice that you had started salivating. So digestion starts in thought. And not only does digestion start in thought, but so does our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, which is our fight or flight or relaxed states.
Yes.
And so when we start a thought, like if you've ever woken up from a bad dream and you're like in sweats and breathing heavy and your heart's going like crazy, that dream didn't actually happen, but you had a physiological response.
Yeah.
So when we think about food and we think of it as good or bad, and if we're stressed about like, is this the right choice? Is this going to make me gain weight? Is this going to affect the scale that way? Can I eat this? Can't I eat that? Is it on my program? Is it not on my program? When we have all this kind of like mental
Anxiety, worry.
anxiety going on when we sit down the food, then we are not sitting down and able to digest in the same way that we are when we're in a relaxed state. So if you think about like if you were being chased down the road with like a gunman was chasing you and you're not going to stop at the donut shop to eat because our brain doesn't focus on digestion or any other survival mechanism at that point. It's in fight or flight. So when we're stressed about food, when we're stressed about if it's a good choice or a bad choice, and when we're stressed about the environment or what other people think of us because we're eating, and we have this mental anxiety, we are also not sitting down and absorbing as much nutrients. And that's been shown a few different ways and a few different studies. And um, so like when different cultures eat different foods, they notice they don't absorb the same nutrients because the pleasure isn't really there, and things like that. So it's pretty fascinating. But yeah, as soon as the thought enters the brain, it goes through this whole processing center that then changes your hormonal response. It changes your fight or flight response, which affects the gut. And which one's telling which, we're not really sure. But big area study right now if the gut's leading the brain or the brain's leading the gut. But one or the other but they're communicating. And if they're not just communicating on like, what nutrients are in this food? Like we as humans go, how many micronutrients, macronutrients,
Yeah.
what vitamins are in it. We think about that because we've been taught to. But our
Yeah.
body has a whole nother like huge realm of things it's interpreting beyond
Yeah.
that affects the chemical response.
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating, and it's such an important thing, right? To either be fully present with whatever you're doing, and I guess that if you are eating a food that you feel guilty about that you've labeled as bad, um,
Mhm.
the stress around that is just going to make the impact so much worse. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, your digestive system literally shuts down in moments of stress. Like it stops. It does. Like if you had a full stomach and somebody was chasing you with a gun, you would not digest that food till
Yeah.
afterwards. Like it would just sit there, or you would start secreting it. Like you would sweat it out and you would pee
Yeah.
it out or whatever.
Not
So
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so in people, and we know, and so cortisol, we know like there's a lot of information about that and how cortisol affects the health. So in your stress response, cortisol is high, and your pleasure centers are low. And the pleasure centers and the neuropeptides that are going on with that are telling you that you're full. They're telling you that to stop eating, to stop seeking food. And those things are all turned down when you're in a stress response.
Yeah.
And so sitting down at a plate calmly and at peace with food and at peace in the moment can really make a big effect. And that can be as easy as literally taking a deep breath. It's like pausing, tell my body, okay, it's calm now. The fire's been put out. I can sit and eat in peace now. And I'm okay with the choices I'm making. And those choices have positives as long as negative. So back to that good or bad comment, every food has positives and negatives. So
Wow.
there isn't really a good or bad food. So like red wine, is it good or bad? Well, both,
Both.
right? Studies have shown both. It's got
Yeah.
good qualities, it's got harmful qualities. Bread,
Yeah.
good or bad? Both. It's got good qualities, it's got bad qualities. All foods, and and everything in excess would cause harm. So the poison
Mm.
makes the dose, or the dose makes the poison, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, so keeping that in mind that there's always a positive, and if you're sitting at a plate and thinking about the positive rather than all the bad things that could come out of that meal, you're gonna chemically have a different response to that eating experience than if you were sitting down going, oh my gosh, this is the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And what empowering work, because I mean, I think food could be, it's such a pleasure of life, and you really want to be fully present for that and
Mhm.
get the best physiological benefit from it, but also emotional, to come in a
Yeah.
good emotional space and to leave in an even better emotional space.
And not only that, but longevity. So when you're restricting and you're feeling like, you're kind of that mental anxiety, it's fatiguing, it's exhausting. And our body's always, and our mind's always looking for the most efficient route in everything. So it's not sustainable. That's why diets fail. It's not anything wrong with the diet necessarily. It's just not sustainable because nobody feels good on one, or very few people feel good on one. And it's
Yeah.
harder to pull out the positives in that experience. And so the longevity isn't there when we're fighting the food rather than enjoying the food. So we get both the physiological response and we get the longevity of being able to maintain it. Because when you're
Yeah.
going on and off of it, that's also very stressful to your body.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a whole emotional side to that too, all the self-criticism that comes along with, I didn't achieve that goal, why wasn't I able to stick with it? So yeah.
Hmm.
We have another comment from Salim, I exercise in order to eat.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother. Actually, we're talking about in my group about joyful movement this month and about that a little bit and how um, finding that joy with movement. So it's not just punishment and it's not penance, which is what
Yeah.
that is. Exercise in order to eat is penance, and that's so common because we've been taught that. We really have. Ate it, negate it is everywhere. If you eat this many calories, you have to burn this many calories, and so we've kind of in this habitual thinking pattern of I have to burn off the calories I eat. But it also has that same thing. Exercise can cause a stress response. And so if you're constantly pushing yourself at high levels and you're not allowing that rest because, well, it doesn't count if you have calm exercise, because that's what we've been taught, then you're actually can be in that stress response from exercise too. And then when you go to sit down and to eat afterwards, if that stress response isn't having some balance and parasympathetic self-care, then you can also have the same cortisol effect with meals to your exercise. You're not going to recover the same way. So it's just like this big like circle, and pleasure, joy, when we bring that into the process, you not only are able to sustain it a lot longer, but you're able to physiologically have a better response to it.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when you say can that physical activity that's really intense, that can also be a stress reliever at times. It's just really your framing of it and the emotional experience you have of it.
That's part of it, but also physiologically, it is a stress response. When
Yeah.
we exercise, and especially when we're trying to improve cardiovascular fitness or improve, and my degree's in exercise science, I wouldn't talk about my background, but when we talk about like improving, we have to cause micro tears in the muscle in order to get that stimulation of growth. And so those micro tears take repair. And so your body has inflammation from exercise always. And it's how you're managing that, and how, and that's fine if you're able to also have recovery, and if you're also having moments of parasympathetic time, so like the low impact exercise, or even just some way to decompress on a regular basis. And your body, when we work with athletes, we have we have work cycles, we have pushing cycles, we have recovery cycles for 4 to 6 weeks, and then we start again. And so that message isn't getting spread, worldwide. People don't respect the rest at this point, but it is a very important aspect of training.
Yeah. So kind of really important to understand what makes the ideal picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly that right there, what you just said is the picture, is not the moments in time. It's the big picture of how is your body going to be able to sustain this healthily without continuing to be in a stress response.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us, we've touched a little bit on kind of enjoying food. So tell us what is the importance of pleasure for health?
Pleasure. Well, it turns on that parasympathetic nervous system. So when we experience joy, when we experience pleasure, when we laugh, we have this whole endorphin response that's like this vitamin that just goes through our entire body, and we just feel good. And you can feel it, if you've ever had a really good laughing session, afterwards you just feel like, oh, that felt good. Yeah. And I'm really excited. Actually, I'm going through a training next month in laughter yoga, and I'm so excited to learn more about that, and just kind of the power of laughter on a more hormonal level. But when we laugh, when we experience pleasure, we have a hormonal response. It's like a drug, and we just feel good. That's why we seek good food. As we have the pleasure principle, says we seek pleasure and run from pain. That's why we run from the hurtful things and we seek the pleasure. But so when we have that, we have this endorphin response. It just feels good. And so when you eat and it feels good, then that parasympathetic system is at work. You have less cortisol in the system. Your digestive system is turned on. Your metabolism's turned on. You respond betterly, my new word. You respond better to the whole process, and your body you're working in alignment with your body rather than constantly trying to fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. And really getting the most out of the experience again, physiologically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we seem to have a question from Stefan. I can't see the whole thing. Can you see it? What is the best way to...
I don't see it.
Stefan, do you mind just writing just the last question? So he says, calorie counting is definitely a simplification of a more complicated process. And then the question says, what's the best way to? And I can't see the rest. It seems to have disappeared.
Okay, so counting calories is part of a more complicated process?
Yeah, it's a simplification of a more complicated process.
Oh, yeah. So basically summarizing what we're talking about. Okay, and then the question is what?
What's the best way to ... And I
count calories. Oh, you're gonna love and hate me. I say don't. I don't coach. I used to be count your calories, write it down, and there's great information you can learn from there, definitely. But when I first started training in fitness, and when I first started coaching, it was like, let's digest all the information. And through learning more, just going back to the roots of biology and learning, when we talk about body respect, it's respecting and trusting that your body has your back and it's in alignment with you to be healthy. It wants to be healthy, and it's got systems in place to do that. What happens is we have all this external information like calorie counting that gets us so focused in on the details that we forget to listen to the internal cues going on. And we forget to feel like, oh yeah, actually my heart rate is actually pretty high when I'm sitting down to this meal because I'm so anxious about it. Because is it the right amount of calories? And did I write it down? And at what point do I need to write it down? And am I within my calories? Am I allowed to eat this today because I'm over my calories? We forget that there's hunger cues, there's fullness cues, satiety is a pleasure response. We need those hormones to be in place in order to tell us what and how much to eat. And they are there, but we've forgotten how to listen to them. So I actually don't coach a calorie counting system because I see more struggle than help in there. So I see much more positive, both mentally and physiological responses when I help people to listen to their body and kind of tune into their own experience rather than relying on external information.
Great. So Stefan's posted another little piece, and he says, "What's the best way to raise resting metabolism?"
I say more joy.
More joy.
Getting off. So like your metabolism is based on oxygen. When it's a fire, right? In order to burn a kcal, you have to raise, you know, you have to heat it up in order to burn calories. And so it's a fire. So what's the best way to start a fire? Oxygen, right? And so you blow on it to get it bigger. And so whether that's through deep breathing, meditation, all these things and everybody's like, which one's the best one? They all are, because they all increase the amount of oxygen delivery to the body. They all turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. And we need both. We don't want the sympathetic nervous system to disappear. It's always going to be there.
We need both, respond. For sure.
We're going to have both. So anything that increases your breathing efficiency. So whether that's just practicing deep breathing, whether it's meditation, yoga, cardio, you know, HIIT intensity, what are we doing? We're breathing, we're getting a lot of oxygen into the body. Whether we're sitting in a stress state, well, we're breathing through our meal. Like, I know that sounds so like, but we breathe naturally, but people stop breathing when they're eating, and people stop breathing. Imagine, like, if I were to like scare you right now, what's the first thing you do?
Hold your breath. Yeah.
You hold your breath, right? And we stop the oxygen flow, and everything starts to slow down and from there. So eating regularly in peace and increasing your oxygen delivery, I think, is the best ways to increase metabolism. That's my own theory. The theory, yeah, you can test the theory. And that right there, it's funny, I saw that comment, not the other ones. So you can test it. That's my whole approach right there, Stefan, is like, determine what you want to find out about your own body, and then determine your own experiment around that. What would happen if, it's a hypothesis, it's a science experiment. If I do this, what happens? And then once you have that, then you can gather information. And my business is called Love Health, and it's an acronym for me for Learn, Observe, Visualize, Evolve. So once you've determined that experience or experiment of what you want to do, what can I learn? What can I observe? What can I visualize? And what can I evolve through this process to gain more information and tools for myself to become healthier in the future, or get closer to that vision I have for myself?
Great. It's like a wonderful method and wonderful acronym too. I mean, it sums it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us, Molly, sorry?
It's easy to remember, which is why I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us how we can find out more about you.
So like you said at the beginning, it's Love Health Coaching. Molly Courtney is my Facebook business page, and it's my business. I also run a group called Worthy and Enough, because a lot of this, you know, like the thoughts and everything come back to, do I deserve good food? Yeah. You know, I live in a big body and I need to negate it or whatever. So there's a lot of underlying belief systems about worth and feeling enough in your body. So my group is Worthy and Enough, and it's individual health solutions. So you can find me there as well, and I can put links, if you're okay with it, down below.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We'll share that so anyone who wants to join can click and request to join there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Molly. This has been so interesting for me, and I think we can tell by the comments. I think you might have some questions after the fact too from anyone who tunes in later. But it's been really, really interesting and a wonderful perspective to hear. I think, you know, since my kind of job is happiness coaching, I'm always astounded by how much infusing our life with joy just takes us to a higher level of living and makes us more successful and now healthier too. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, there's
why that works.
There's a serious like response going on within your body that starts all up here. Yeah. And so if you can find the positive, like I said, you know, if it's that bad food, find the good in it. There's something good about that food too. Yeah. There's always something good. So yeah.
And I always think that that's such a kind of win-win with happiness. The research is always like, the more joy you're feeling, you kind of get the benefit too, and it's not a choice. And there's something so wonderful about that you can get to be healthy and happy, and the happier you are, the healthier you are.
Well, Thank you. It was so much fun having it. I'm so excited. We're reversing this next week, right? And I get to interview you on my page. So if for anybody who enjoyed this, like come to Love Health next week and you can watch us reverse this and I get to interview you.
Exciting.
So yeah.
Great.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Molly. Thanks everyone for watching. That was so fascinating. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'm sure Molly will come back and help you out with them. And you can join her group called Worthy and Enough. Thank you all and see you next week.